Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about Dungeons & Dragons, Magic the Gathering, the new Guilds of Ravnica Dungeons & Dragons setting, and the death of Vancian magic. Alright, so here's the thing. Guilds of Ravnica is now introduced into Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. In my opinion, Guilds of Ravnica is now the official setting of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Why is Ravnica the official Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition setting? Because it's the only setting in 5th edition that has ever been acknowledged in a book and said, here is the setting. Here are the races of the setting. Here are the places that exist within this setting. Here is pages and pages of descriptions of the history and lore of this setting. 5th edition has never, ever had a setting book. It has had adventures that mentioned settings that were defined in previous editions. None of those are official. Eberron got a setting book. It was never even established as, you couldn't even bring it to the table. It was not even possible to bring the Dungeons & Dragons Eberron setting to the table because it was literally a PDF. It never even got a hardback book, right? So Ravnica is the only Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition setting, right, that has a hardback book and has been treated the way every other setting has been treated in every other edition. In my opinion, Ravnica is the official setting of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. There's no rules reason to bring Magic into Dungeons & Dragons. There's no world reason to bring Magic the Gathering into Dungeons & Dragons. There's an incredible, strong, pervasive commercial reason to bring Magic the Gathering into Dungeons & Dragons. Now, here's the problem, okay? What is the source of magic in Dungeons & Dragons? There are the source of magic in Dungeons & Dragons is bifurcated, okay? It is arcane magic, which comes from the world and the universe, and it is literally that generic, and it is split across, I'm not kidding here, 20 different settings, all talking about slightly different sources for magic. So arcane magic in Dungeons & Dragons is very generic. It comes from the world and it comes from the universe. Also in Dungeons & Dragons, there is divine magic. Divine magic is granted to faithful religious followers by deities. It makes absolutely no sense within Dungeons & Dragons that there is arcane magic and there is divine magic. It never made sense. Now, I think the reason for this in 1974, Gary Gygax had a very different opinion of the supernatural than he had nearer to his death, right? And you can read that in any book, that his opinions on religion changed, right? So, but Magic the Gathering, Dungeons & Dragons magic is very bifurcated and confusing, right? Magic the Gathering does not have that problem, not at all, okay? So one, in Magic the Gathering, the source of magic is land. The magic comes from 5 different land types. It comes from plains, swamps, mountains, islands, and forests, okay? Forest is growth magic, life magic. Plains are peace and protection magic, okay? The mountains are fury and destruction magic, essentially, right? The swamps provide parasitic and debilitating magic, and finally, the islands give time magic and manipulation magic, right? There are very, very distinct differences in these types of magic. They are fundamentally not mixable, right? They are not the same at all. One was created in 1974. The magic types were created for Dungeons & Dragons in 1974. The magic types for Magic the Gathering were made in 1993. Magic the Gathering has a very modern outlook on how magic is created, and it has a consistent. There isn't that bifurcation, right? If gods are even mentioned within Magic the Gathering, they are literally controlled by planeswalkers, which are human beings generally. They are. Planeswalkers are humans. There's a few planeswalkers who aren't human. Nissa is elf. So they're humanoid, right? So the gods are literally controlled by humanoids within Magic the Gathering. It's not, and within Dungeons and Dragons, it's the flip. The gods can control humans. It's oil and water. They don't mix. They're fundamentally different sources, okay? Now, Dungeons and Dragons magic, especially arcane, okay, is, and even arcane magic in Dungeons and Dragons, the way wizards get their spells is Vancian magic. They cast a spell once, and then they forget that spell, okay? And then they have to reestablish it in their mind for the next day. This is 100% incorrect in Magic the Gathering, okay? A Magic the Gathering planeswalker, when they cast a spell, okay, they draw power from the lands they have been on or that they're currently on. They bind themselves to the different lands they've experienced and that they've been on. They draw magic from that land, right? And then they cast a spell, right? That spell is placed out into the world, right? And then if their concentration is broken or if what they conjured is destroyed, it goes to a separate place, okay? It goes to two distinct places. It can be exiled outside of the universe, or it can be retained within the universe, but in a different space than the material plane, right? But that planeswalker has the ability to literally forcefully bring that spell back immediately. Immediately. It is completely and utterly different than Vancian magic, right? Vancian magic is completely and utterly different, fundamentally different than the magic that's being used within Magic the Gathering. So Dungeons and Dragons historical arcane magic does not mix in any way with Magic the Gathering magic. It simply doesn't, right? Now, if you got oil and water, right, they're not going to mix, right? So you got to determine, so it's going to be one or the other, right? And here's the thing. So I think Wizards of the Coast is going to have to choose between Magic the Gathering being the new setting and it replacing all the Dungeons & Dragons settings and them never making any setting books again for Dungeons & Dragons, and all setting books going forward are Magic the Gathering setting books, right? And I can hear people like, they would never do that. They'll absolutely do that, in my opinion. Here's why, right? 5th edition proved Dungeons & Dragons does not need any setting ever made for Dungeons & Dragons before 2018. For 4 years, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition did fantastic with no official setting. It had not a single setting book, not one. It sold like hotcakes and flew off the shelves, right? So all of the Dungeons & Dragons settings that have come before are completely superfluous. They are unneeded to sell Dungeons & Dragons. And I have to say, this is kind of the fault of all the designers that have come before, because the reality is, if you look back in time, Planescape was good, Dark Sun was good, I think Eberron was pretty cool, right? But the reality is, there were a lot of good settings, there were some terrible settings, right? There's halt settings, dormant settings, and active settings, right? Halt settings will never go forward. Dormant settings are completely duplicative. This is all Dungeons & Dragons settings. And active settings, it's been proven by 5th edition, they're not needed. They're absolutely not needed, right? So if Wizards of the Coast is like, oh my gosh, we already have literally like 20 settings that have already been made, completely illustrated in Magic the Gathering, and we can port them over easily at any time at a greatly reduced cost, there is a commercial reason then to replace the Dungeons & Dragons settings with Magic the Gathering settings. In my opinion, Ravnica is the death of Vancian magic in Dungeons & Dragons. That's my thought. Let me know what you think. Please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you.